So let's set the scene. We're going back to the height of the Great Recession in Southern Europe. The construction industry, it was on its knees. Jobs were scarce, wages were rock bottom, and out on the job site, well, let's just say human value was being tested every single day. The name of the game was survival, not motivation. But right in the middle of all that, this simple story unfolded, and it teaches us something pretty profound about what actually gets us to work.
Okay, so our story is about this group of Portuguese construction workers. They traveled over to Spain for a project, so they're far from home, living together in a boarding house, and just facing this absolutely grueling physical labor, day in and day out. The mornings were especially tough. And, well, that's where all the trouble started. Just try to imagine this. You start your day with intense, back-breaking labor, but there's no breakfast, no break in the morning. In fact, you don't get a scrap of food until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. After a few days of that, your body starts to scream louder than any contract you ever signed. So the team just stopped working. And look, this wasn't some strike over pay. It was a total shutdown born from just sheer physical need. Their ultimatum couldn't have been clearer. It was direct, and it was absolutely non-negotiable. They weren't asking for more money or better hours. This was about a basic, fundamental human need. The message was just simple. We cannot build if we don't have the fuel to do it, you know? This wasn't a negotiation. It was a biological fact. So what was the big, complicated solution? It was a simple, practical agreement. Every single day, mid-morning, a solid sandwich would be delivered to the site. And we're not talking about something flimsy. We're talking a proper baguette with cured meat, cheese, real food that gives you real energy. And just like that, the conflict was over. No wages were cut, nothing like that. Something far more crucial was just recognized. Work started up again immediately, and not only that, it flowed. Productivity was totally back on track. But here's the thing. This wasn't just about an empty stomach. If it was, the promise of a paycheck at the end of the week should have been enough to keep them going, right? So what was really happening here? Why did this one little gesture, a sandwich, have such a massive impact? Well, the answer is all about this invisible line between necessity and dignity. See, these workers were being treated like they were just disposable parts in a machine. You'd hear stuff like, if you're not happy, there are 20 other guys waiting to take your spot. So the fight for the sandwich, it wasn't just about hunger. It was a fight to be seen and respected as actual human beings. This one simple act of care caused this huge shift in their mindset. Before, you had desperate laborers. They were working out of fear, just doing what they were told, feeling like a number. That's where the team was at. But that sandwich, it was like a bridge. It moved them from that column over to the other one, where they became conscious builders, working with a real purpose, truly producing, all because they finally felt dignified. And, this isn't just some feel-good story. It's actually a perfect case study that's backed up by decades of psychological research into what makes us tick at work. In fact, a bunch of really well-known theories can show us exactly what was going on at that construction site.
Yeah, the connection to motivation theory here is just undeniable. First up, you've got Maslow's hierarchy, right? You can't even begin to talk about higher-level stuff like purpose if basic needs like food aren't met. The sandwich was literally the foundation of the pyramid. Then there's Herzberg, who talked about hygiene factors. Things like this, they don't necessarily motivate you, but their absence creates massive dissatisfaction. Providing the sandwich didn't make them superworkers, it just removed the problem so they could work. Adams' equity theory tells us they stopped to restore a sense of fairness. And finally, Blau's social exchange theory shows that the agreement rebuilt that sense of give and take. It became a human deal, not just a business transaction.
So, okay, what does this story from a construction site in Spain a decade ago mean for leaders and managers today, really in any industry? Well, it gives us a really clear, actionable playbook for creating an environment where people don't just show up and obey, but where they actually want to produce.
All right, so here's the playbook. It starts with the absolute basics: purposeful breaks and decent, clean facilities. The human climate of your workplace is built right there. Step 3 is so important. Listen to the small complaints before they turn into big problems. Then you've got to honor that unspoken psychological contract, those mutual expectations of respect and fairness. And finally, measure what actually matters. Don't just track output, track the human metrics like absences and error rates. They tell you the real story of how your team is doing. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? We get so caught up in timelines, budgets, and materials. But this story teaches us that the real thing that speeds you up or slows you down is the level of care and respect you give to the people doing the work. Looking after your people isn't a soft skill, it is a critical driver of progress.
Here's another way to think about it. You can burn through people with fear and necessity, for sure, but that energy runs out. It just leads to burnout and conflict. Dignity, though, that's different. When you treat people with respect, you tap into a source of energy that actually renews itself day after day.
And that leaves all of us with one final, really critical question. The answer isn't always a literal sandwich, of course. For your team, it might be getting feedback on time. It might be better tools, a clean place to take a break, or maybe just feeling like they're actually being heard. The whole point is to find that one simple, fundamental thing that shows your team they are seen not as numbers on a spreadsheet, but as valued human beings. So take a second and think, what's the sandwich that your team is asking for?